Tonight is party night, okay? 2 weeks ago you heard about the first mill in Fall River, and then last week you heard about the terrorists in Fall River. And tonight is just party night, and we're just going to go over some of the events that happened and some of the anecdotes, a few things I picked up along the way, and telling you something about the Cotton Centennial. And I think it was truly the greatest party that Fall River ever threw. We did a pretty good job at the Centennial, if you remember. The Bicentennial was a little bit less. But as far as the crowds were concerned, and as far as the fact that we had a president come and visit us, really the Cotton Centennial was unsurpassed. The music that you were listening to when you came in wasn't, I didn't mean that to be just, it was background music, but it was a march written by John Philip Sousa in 1895 for the Southern States Cotton Exposition. And he titled the march in honor of that exposition, King Cotton. Now, if cotton was king in any city in the United States at the end of the 19th to the early 20th century, it was here in Fall River, Massachusetts. We produce more cotton cloth than any other city in the world. We produce more cotton cloth than any entire state in the United States. And again, we had something going here. The mills were making money, over 40 corporations, over 100 mills operating in 1911. When you look at the numbers, everybody comes up with a different number, but we'll just say over 40 corporations, over 100 mills. As far as employees were concerned, close to 30,000, not including those people who were in associated industries. So cotton was king in Fall River like it was king in no other place. So I think Sousa could have wrote this march for us in 1911. It applies to us as much as it applies to anyone else. As I said, the mills were making money. People who worked in the mills were making a little bit of money. They weren't the best jobs in the world, but they were jobs. And a lot of us are sitting here today because our grandparents or great-grandparents came to work in those mills. My grandfather Kitchen came from a place called Clitheroe in Lancashire. He brought his family over in the 1880s. The cotton industry collapsed during the American Civil War in England. Brought his family here. They worked in the mills. My grandfather LePage was recruited in Canada, and he brought his large brood of French Canadians down. He was a cultivator, a farmer in other words, probably a subsistence farmer, and brought his family down. They all worked in the mills. He worked at Cody Piano Factory, okay, which was actually probably a better job. Fall River felt in 1911 that they had the world by the tail, and that this thing was only going to get bigger and better all the time. So let's just go through some of this, and let me just show you some of the slides. Again, this Fall River looms up. Looming up was the theme here. Loom up, Fall River boys. There was a march written by that, and there was a big, when they had the fireworks, there was a fireworks display, a set piece that said, Loom up, Fall River boys. And on this particular slide is the old 1911 mill, which Jay straightened us out on. Okay, it's still being advertised as the first cotton mill in the city. Not successful, by the way. At least the original one was. A modern mill. They look like the mills we see today because they're the same ones. Okay, and of course you have the trolley cars. We did have electric trolley cars in 1911. So Fall River was really moving along. That's probably another thing that made Fall Riverites feel pretty good. Okay. In association with the various parades and things, there were also displays around the city. There was a display in the Armory of Ladies' Handiwork. At the Durfee Technical College, there was a display of goods made in Fall River. There was a history display at the music hall, including the desk that Thomas Durfee sat on in that first mill. And there was an art display of Fall River school artists down at the library. They still have many of those paintings down there right now. Okay. And a view of Fall River, of course, back in 1911. I think the smoke, I think, was put in by an artist or something. It just looked very, very, very fake, okay? But there were lots of people working in the mills in any case. And I just wanted to make the point that, you know, with a population of over 100,000, 1/4 of the population or more, actually more than that, was working in the mills, closer to I guess 30, 35%. everybody knew somebody that worked in the mills. Okay. American Printing Company, the largest print works in the world, down where the old Firestone used to be, where Tillerson is today. You can see it here. Take a look at some of the numbers. As they mentioned over here. This, of course, was a print works. They not only produced the cotton cloth, they also bleached it and dyed it and printed on the cloth. And you'll notice that they mentioned 6,000 yards each week, and they produced enough cloth to go around the world 7 times in a year. That was one mill, okay? Think of all the others that were producing cotton cloth. I once saw some of the numbers, and they were astronomical. There was nobody that came really very close to us in any case. But it gives you an idea. These are the 6,000 employees in this particular group of mills. Okay. And for the party, we had to dress the city up. You may have seen some of these photographs. There's the electric trolley car. This arch, which was built over the main street, was made out of wood, made to look like marble. And then later on, they installed lights on this. It was pretty spectacular. Most of the street lights in Fall River were gas lights in those days, and they put electric lights on these. And I even read where they only strung 50 in a row, like those Christmas lights, so that they wouldn't blow out the fuses. They all had individual lines. So they're dressing up the city here, bunting everywhere. Okay. You notice the horse and wagon is still the main means of transportation, I guess, but there were plenty of automobiles, as you'll see in just a minute. The gentleman over here, I think he's putting the lights up, that guy working over here to the right-hand side, and he's putting the lights on that arch. Okay. And a good view of the trolley cars. Notice all the gentlemen with hats. All the ladies you'll see with hats. Even the poorer people wore hats. The gentlemen, if you didn't have much money, you might have one hat that you wore all year round. But generally, Memorial Day was the day that the gentlemen went into their straw hats if they had them. And you'll see some gentlemen in straw hats later on. And you can see them standing around. So gentlemen wore hats. And it was rather strange. I can always remember my dad always wore a hat. When he saw a lady, he tipped his hat. When he went by at the front of a church, he tipped his hat. He did not sit in a restaurant and eat with his hat on, however. Okay, so times change and the rules for wearing hats change also, I guess. Okay. And another view, this is looking down, you can see the Academy building in the back here. And of course, R.A. McQueers. I found out if you ever give a talk someplace and you get stuck, just mention McQueers. Everybody jumps in. Don't have to do anything. Just talk with people. Everybody remembers McQueers. You could get anything in McQueers. And I was always fascinated with the pneumatic system where they put your money in a tube and then went up. And when it came back, you had change and a receipt in it. And it was an amazing place. An amazing place. Okay. And the City Hall. This is where they were going to crown the Queen of the Cotton Centennial on the first day of the Centennial. Okay. And here's the arch at night, completely lit. Now the side streets were lit with gas lights, but downtown they had these electric lights. And this was amazing to somebody who lived in 1911. And I think you have to put yourself back in that particular period of time. We get jaded. We have so much and we see so much. And technology always fascinates me. And back then, a string of electric lights hanging on something is mystifying people. Okay. Oh, and the first day of the Cotton Centennial, we're going to crown the Queen. The Queen of the Cotton Centennial was a young lady named Marion Pierce Hills. And she just happened to be the daughter of the president of the Manufacturers Association. Now, not that made any difference, because she was not the first choice. The first choice was her sister, who was rather shy and retiring and decided she didn't like all of the rigmarole that went with it, and so she became the Queen of the May, if you like. But when you look at which actually was June, I guess, in this particular case, but she had a court. The court had 18 young ladies, and it's rather interesting. The new paper called it the society set, and it was. They were not girls who came out of the mills. Their names were McQuirr, Duvall, Waring, Brayton, Charlton, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Okay? So they were the people who came from the money class, if you like. But there they are with their parasols on. We don't really have a good picture here of what the Queen looked like up close, to be honest with you. Okay. Now the band was serenading the crowd before the Queen got here. This is the Germania Band. This is a German band that happens to have a conductor named John McCarthy. And by the way, it seems that the Irish, when you look at it, you see the Irish, they're all policemen. And for some reason, policemen and Irishmen seem to go together. Maybe they figured out it was an easier job than working in the mills. I don't know. But seemed to be. But the Germania Band played a number of not only marches. Marches were popular. Remember, this is the era of John Philip Sousa. But they also played a lot of popular songs. And I just jotted down some of them. Some of the popular songs. All Aboard for Blanket Bay. Kiss Me, My Honey, Kiss Me. And a song you're going to hear, I'm going to make you listen to later on, Come Josephine and My Flying Machine, because it happens to fit into this thing rather nicely. So Come Josephine and My Flying Machine. Now, as the Queen approached, the band struck up a march called the Imperial March by a fellow named Bird Anthony, who was probably the second most successful composer that come out of Fall River. I don't think he ever made a real living at it. And he died actually quite young. But he did write some number of pieces, one of which that Sousa Band actually played when they came to Fall River. It was a ragtime piece. But in any case, of course, Joe Raposo, who did a lot of the music for Sesame Street, was probably Favre's greatest composer and actually made a pretty good living at it. And again, died at a very early age. And here's the Queen arriving here, as you see. The mounted gentlemen, the outriders, again, are all from the society set. Only the 4 Irish mounted policemen are from the, if you like, the middle class, if you would have it. Okay, next. And there's the Queen on the stage. If you look carefully, you can see her with a crown. And there's Mayor Higgins, who is making the announcement that she is Queen of the Cotton Centennial. Now, by the way, if someone wanted something a little more melancholy, the band also played Silver Threads Among the Gold. There was a cornet solo there, and most people remember that that's a piece that people do remember. Okay. On the second day was Automobile Day, or Auto Day. Now, there are a number of people who own automobiles in Fall River, and then there are also a lot of people who lived in the outlying areas that drove over to Fall River. And they had an automobile parade, and from what I understand, they probably had very close to 100 automobiles of various types. And they did compete in various categories, and they all got kind of dressed up for various reasons. I put this one in because my first thought, I thought they did it with toilet paper, it seems like. It's, but I'm sure it's something a little more stable, because it happened to rain that day, which would have really disintegrated everything else. And the ladies with their parasols. Okay. Now, there are 3 ladies sitting in the back of that. You can hardly see them for all the decorations, you see. And somebody put a lot of time and effort into this. Okay. This looks like a little bit of a tropical piece here. Now, notice the gentleman's straw hat. The gentleman's straw hat. And again, Memorial Day was when you broke out the straw hats. And later on, I'm going to talk about the hat bands that they sold that people put up around the hats for these special occasions. And you'll see, especially, it was one event that occurred during the Cotton Centennial where it gave the younger people a chance to get out and have a good time and let off some steam. Okay. And the cars were classified, you know, small roadsters, large cars, and again, and by the decorations on the cars. Okay. There was one car in the parade that had a number of suffragettes. And of course, that was something new, ladies looking for the vote. Down in Newport, Alva Vanderbilt was very active in the suffragette movement and had many meetings at her home at Marble House. And of course, that movement was beginning to spread. And so I don't know what kind of a reception they got in Fall River, but in any case, there they were making themselves known. We don't have a picture of them, by the way. Okay. Now, this is not but this gentleman somehow decorated his car, make it look like a boat. And you notice it did rain that day. You can see the streets all wet. One of the most talked about cars was Edward Waring's car, who he had made up to look like a bale of cotton. And he and his passenger sat in the car in blackface. Okay, so, and actually this had noticed in the newspapers, by the way, not that it was racist or anything, people liked it. And there are pictures of that around because I've actually seen it. Okay. And a smaller car and kind of fancy, and the ladies with their hats, of course. Now the parade started up at the Highlands, where most of the people would have these automobiles, and they went downtown, went as far out as the old mill, the 1911 mill, and turned around and came back. So everybody got a chance to see the cars. They went everywhere. Okay. Before we get on to this particular slide, I just wanted to mention that it was on the second day, Tuesday night, that they had the fireworks display. The American Band gave a concert. There was a set piece, and I remember when I was a kid going to Columbus Park. You don't see many set pieces anymore. By that I mean something that's on the ground, doesn't go up and explode. People like noise today. And if you went to Columbus Park, they had a number of set pieces, one after another. And in this particular case, the set piece said, "Loom Up, Fall River Boys," and they played George Foley's march, "Loom Up, Fall River Boys." George Foley was another composer who came from Fall River, not as successful as Bert Anthony. And it said the crowds stayed at the park, at South Park, till after midnight. Now the next day, this had nothing to do with the Centennial, but Ringling Brothers Circus came to town. Fall River, of course, had over 100,000 people, most of them working. Now they weren't making a lot of money, but Circus Day was probably the second most popular day in the lives, especially of children. My dad, who was born in 1898, would tell me that, you know, his birthday meant nothing, because he got nothing. He might get a little something at Christmas time, but when the circus came, even if you didn't have any money, there was always the adventure of going down and seeing these exotic animals, watching the circus unload, watching the circus parade, which, by the way, was their advertising, okay? And watching the circus parade, and then watching the teardown. And if he were lucky, he might go out and actually get a little job setting up seats or something and get a free pass to the show. Now this is the Ringling Brothers Circus. The other biggest circus at the time was Barnum and Bailey, both owned by the Ringling Brothers, by the way. And what they did in the early part of the 20th century is they alternated. Ringling Brothers this year, Barnum and Bailey next, Ringling, Barnum and Bailey that way. So this put a lot of excitement into the lives of people. Now on this particular day, the police estimated there were about 150,000 people in the city. Look at the crowd and you can believe it. Now this is really an extra. The circus happens to be in town during the Cotton Centennial. And what the circus did when they came to town, they contracted with the railroads to run special excursion trains into the city. So you had people coming from Taunton, Newport, Providence, New Bedford. And they would come into the city to see the show. And in this particular case, this is interesting. If you look carefully, you'll see some men marching. You see a number of horses. That's a 40-horse hitch. The driver there is driving 40 horses. Did not take 40 horses to pull that wagon. But it was an advertising piece, because people who knew horses and anyone who ever drove a team knew handling 40 horses is a big job. And so we have over here, as I said, the so-called 40-horse hitch, which again was an advertising piece. They'd advertise this in the paper, come and see the 40-horse hitch, get people downtown. Okay, next. Now this one here, you see the arch. Now this is kind of fun. What happened yesterday, we found this in this photo, and I wanted to include it. And so we called out to the Historical Society, and Dennis scanned it into and then he sent it to my house, and Stephanie put it in, okay? And of course, Dennis's note, he called this the Dumbo daisy chain. Elephants are always close to the end of the parade for a couple of reasons. Actually, they were the big attraction, so you want to keep them till the end, but there was other more practical reasons as well. Generally bringing up the rear would be the so-called steam piano, steam calliope, or as circus folk called it, the calliope, which was a steam organ really, and it was usually out of tune, and it was, but boy, it would rattle the windows, so you knew the circus was in town. But look at the crowd here, the enormous crowd. And I think back when we ran the parade on the Fall River's bicentennial, I thought the crowd, they were 2 and 3 deep, in some places, not very few people. But here, look at the crowd watching the circus parade. What they did was they came down Bedford Street, made a left-hand turn onto Main, and went up to the showgrounds. I'm going to guess the showgrounds then were probably at Broadway, although there were showgrounds to the east of the Merchant's Mill. And whether they went there, I haven't checked it out, to be honest with you. Okay. Now, this was the big parade on that day. Actually, the circus parade was at 10. At 3 o'clock in the afternoon, we have the trades parade and the various groups, the loom fixers, the carpenters. And it said this endless line, as you can see here. I don't know whether there was any music in this parade. It's just endless line of workers, which took an hour and 3/4 for all these wagons to go by. I want to guess this is the Carpenters Union over here where they built the house on the wagon. Clever, aren't I? Okay, next. Now, notice that on this wagon here, they're selling the Manchester land on Brayton Avenue. And this is looks like a residential house. So what they're trying to do in 1911 is break up the land into small house lots, and they're going to sell it off at $200 to $300 a house lot. This would be on Brayton Avenue now. I also, if you look around, you'll notice up above, there's a dentist up here with painless extractions. And also, you can get a full set of teeth for $8. So, $8 was a lot of money in those days, by the way. Okay. I'm going to guess this is a business school, okay? And there were many of these in the city. They train people to work in offices. And you'll notice there's gentlemen and ladies, and they're sitting down. Looks like they're typing on their typewriters. Just as the Durfee Technical College trained people to work in the mills, basically, is what they did. And I'm not so sure they gave degrees but in those days, but they did train people to work in the mills. Okay. And this old gent, this is a cot he built himself, it says, and he's over from Masonic. And again, I noticed the 2 gentlemen with their straw hats on. I used to exchange Christmas cards with a fellow named Merle Evans, who directed the Ringlings band for something like 50 years. And every Christmas I'd send him a card, and every Christmas he sent me back a card. And when he looked at the postmark, it said Fall River, Mass. He said, this is where we would break out our straw hats, at Fall River. They know when the show got to Fall River, it was June, time to break out your straw hats. Okay. Okay. Now this is a ladies' store over here, and it does say the coronation a gown. Now whether the queen is standing on that float or not, I don't really know. I couldn't find any information out about that. But it is a ladies' store that's doing the advertising here. Okay. And one of the few non-horse-drawn vehicles in the parade, this particular truck here. And of course, this is where what you're looking at here is the granite block, and you can just see it in the upper right-hand corner piece of the archway. Okay. Okay, Steph. This company, Koval and Osborne, they made mill supplies, and again, there was a lot of other jobs because there was a demand, and there were reed companies and other companies that would make various things to go into the mill. So cotton was a big thing, and it employed a lot of people either directly or indirectly. Okay. It looks like to me what they have here, they've got on their float just some of the things that they make. Okay. And then this little truck, by the way, and you see the old mill coffee. This is a wholesale grocer. And by the way, this is a chain-driven truck, if you'll notice. Yeah. Rear-wheel drive, but it's got a chain drive on it. You notice it? Looks like a bicycle. Oh. Okay, one of the early trucks. Okay. And again, an endless view of these wagons. Now, I get a kick. It says, wash day nowadays. Now, wash days before, in the 1800s, a lady had a washboard and, of course, would wash things in the tub, spend a lot of day washing. But they were getting really modern. Not modern. No one had washing machines, by the way. They did something called wet wash. And I remember wet wash because we had wet wash. And what happened was, at Sunday evening, my mother would put out the bag of dirty laundry. And during the night, the laundryman would come by and pick it up. He would take it back to the laundry, and then on Tuesday he would deliver it to you, and it would be all washed, but it would be damp. So then my mother would dry the clothes, and then after they dried, she'd do the ironing. So she would spend a great deal of time doing laundry. No such thing as wash and wear. Things have just changed so much. But no one had washing machines, at least not the average person living in a house. And no one would want you to have one because they wouldn't want to pay the water bill in any case. But wet wash, so in 1911, this is a big thing, wet wash. Today it seems archaic, doesn't it? We do everything ourselves, throw it in the laundry, dry it. It comes out, a lot of things are wrinkle-proof or nearly wrinkle-proof. And things are just a lot easier. Okay. Pardon?
They're going in two directions.
What's going on?
The people are going in two directions.
Oh yes, I just mentioned, if you look here, wagons are going this way. The guys marching are going in the opposite direction. Thank you, Steph.
Yeah.
Okay, and finally I'm looking at the route of the parade, and what it did was it went out South Main Street, turned around and came back down. So my guess is the people here have already seen these guys watching, okay? They finished up back here at the City Hall, which seemed to be a little bit confusing. I think today a lot of people would have a hard time keeping track of that, I think. At least some of the kids I had in school years ago would have a hard time keeping track of that. And the fellows with the little flags over here. And again, there was a wagon in the parade, and it was the Temperance Society. Now, there seemed to be a lot of temperance societies. They had Catholics, they had Protestants, I guess they had a lot of drinkers, and in any case. But the Temperance Society had a water wagon. And the water wagon, of course, had a sign on it, and it says, "Join us, the water's fine." And again, I know there was a Catholic one and there was a Protestant Temperance Society. Of course, when the 20s came, they put in prohibition, which that didn't help the situation much either. Okay, so that pretty much ended the trades parade. And the next day was called Merchants' Day. And they decided to have, this was the first horse show that they ran at North Park. And I understand Spencer Borden had a major role in organizing the thing. And there were many different categories. This was a major, major horse show. This is a brewery wagon. This is, remember James Hanley Brewing Company? You may remember they were in business. As a kid, I can remember that. But in this particular case, these guys are driving a 6-horse hitch. People understood horses in those days. When the circus came to town with 400 or 500 horses, people, I mean, they appreciated the horses, and they knew good horse flesh when they saw it. So that having someone drive not a 40-horse hitch, but a 6-horse hitch here seems to work pretty well. Okay. That's a pretty high jump. So they had the jumpers. We also have one picture I didn't put in, the guy falling off the horse going over the jump. Okay. Sometimes these are called dog carts. They're just a 2-wheel cart. And it looks like a little girl is driving it. It's pulled by a pony. Okay. Young lady on her horse. There was dressage. And they came in various categories, and the thing was very well organized. Everything went off on time. There was no delay. And according to the newspaper reports, it was just an A1 day. Okay. This is a tandem hitch. Instead of the horses being in a pair together, one horse is in front of the other. So it's called a tandem hitch. And again, it's just a 2-wheel vehicle. And again, it was a test of the driver's skill. Okay. I don't know if this is Spencer Borden or not. I don't think it is. But of course, Spencer Borden raised Arabians. And he raised them out on Interlaken. I don't know whether anyone knows where Interlaken is. About every other year or so, the trustees of reservations runs a walk. If you know where the old, come down Route 24, there's the old ice house. Now, originally, if you went into Boston Road, went right straight into that particular area. And Interlaken was in there. The remains of Interlaken are still out there. It's a very interesting walk, relatively short. And I'm sure and I know the trustees would be glad to have you. Next time they have a walk, it's in the paper. It's an interesting place. But he raised his horses there, and they do mention it in the paper that he brought some of the studs over and displayed them at this particular show. Okay. Okay. I'm going to guess these fellas, this is part of a parade, and these fellas are I think they're Knights of Columbus. May be wrong. And you notice the trolley right behind them. They did have a grand carnival parade in the evening at 8 p.m. And they did have, this is where they had the military, religious groups, business groups. But 8 o'clock at night, they're not going to take too many photographs. Now, this is about the longest day of the year. So you get till about 8:30 or so. And I don't think they never had any type of fast film that they could use. So any pictures they took must have been at the very beginning of the parade here. But they did have about 15 bands in the parade. Okay. And this actually, and then here you see, it looks like some sort of a military group marching down, or there were lots of social clubs and things that actually wore uniforms. And again, there's probably National Guard, looks like Army, and somebody in white behind them, perhaps Navy. Okay. And again, I think this is from the first parade. This is a little bit out of sequence, but again, you notice the marches are going in one direction and the wagons are going in the other. So if you came late, get a chance to see the parade as it came back at the same time. We had President's Day came in, and no one, William Howard Taft came to Fall River. He was invited and took up the invitation and visited Fall River. This is the presidential yacht. Now this came in on the next to last day of the Cotton Centennial, and this is called the Mayflower. It was accompanied by the battleship Connecticut, which could not come up the river too far, and they anchored down off Common Fence Point, and 2 revenue cutters, the Gresham and the Acushnet. Now, the Revenue Marine, by the way, was the forerunners of the Coast Guard. What they did was they combined the Revenue Marine, the Lighthouse Service, and a few other things, and they formed the Coast Guard. The Revenue Marine has been around since Alexander Hamilton's time. In school they teach you about the fact that no one wanted to pay taxes to King George. No one wanted to pay taxes to anybody. And Alexander Hamilton finally realized that you can't run a government without money, and so he established the Revenue Marine to try to collect some of those duties. Okay. Another view of the Mayflower, and there was lots of activity in the port at that day, up and down the river, from the south end to the north end. Okay. And if you look carefully, you'll see he has his hat off. Very large man, mustache, and he's greeting the Fall River dignitaries. He landed at the Ironworks Dock, which was, of course, where the old Firestone was. Okay. And you notice they're all very formal. They got their formal top hats on. Some people have Panama hats. And later on, and then the fellows down here have their straw hats on. Okay. Now, they drove him all over the city. He even made a comment in his talk that he said that he thought he was on every street. If he wasn't, it's only because somebody forgot to take it. They took him everywhere. They took him to the Flint, and he stopped at the orphanage, and the kids gave him, at St. Joseph's Orphanage, some flowers. They took him up to Highland Avenue, where he visited with Bishop Feehan. They had spent time together as youngsters in the same town. And so they knew each other. And so he met with Bishop Feehan, and they took him everywhere and anywhere. In this day and age, I don't think you could get close to the president, although, as Phil told us, there were a lot of presidents were assassinated about this, even back then. Okay. And the kid's fighting to shake his hand. Marshall Hat Company gave him 4 hats. It was a big manufacturer in the city, and they gave him a hat for every season. We do have a picture at the Historical Society that I couldn't find, but he put for a while he wore his straw hat, put it on. Actually, it looks better with the bowler. Okay.
Does this mean it was cold in June?
The question was it cold in June?
Everybody's wearing a coat.
Well, I don't know. Yeah, he looks like he's kind of cold, and I don't think it was raining.
There's no shadows underneath.
Yeah. Oh, could be. But everybody else seems to be, and of course, you notice even everybody had a jacket on like this. And I get even people who didn't have much money had something that they would wear. Okay. This particular picture was, remember, gay photographers. You see a lot of their pictures are beginning to show up on eBay. And this one was taken by a gay photographers, and there he is sitting in the back of his car. I think that guy with the Panama hat sitting sideways in the front seat is probably with the Secret Service, I guess, equivalent.
It does.
Yeah, Woodrow Wilson, yeah. Okay. And again, here he is traveling around the city, and he looks a little cooler in this particular. But as I said, they took him everywhere, south end, north end, everywhere. The Flint, they gave everybody a chance to see him. Just showed him off. Okay. President Taft at the old mill. There he is. And of course, they built all of this around that particular mill, which I think Jay told us was really not the original anyway. It may have been built on the site. As a matter of fact, there's a sign there. It says Fall River's first, my guess is the next part, a cotton mill. Okay. And there he is making his speech. It was a relatively short speech. He actually said, I did not come here to make a speech. I came here to say howdy do. I congratulate you again on your wonderful progress. He did make an allusion to the fact that he wondered what we'd be like in 100 years. He did comment about the fact that the labor force is made up of people from all over the world, immigrants. And of course, in these days, the big immigrant population were the French. Somewhere between 1/3 and 1/2 of Fall Riverites, it had French surnames. And of course, they were recruited in Canada and brought down in relatively large numbers. Before we, that evening, by the way, they had something called the Grand Confetti Carnival. And this seemed to be the chance that the young folks would have to get together and raise a little bit of heck, okay? And so this was done in the evening, and the idea being everybody, whether they made confetti out of old newspapers or what, and they just went down there and threw this thing, confetti over everyone. They did set up some rules. One of the rules was you couldn't use ticklers. And I think there might have been those things, you know, you blow it at parties with a feather at the end. So you couldn't bother people like that. But you could throw confetti. And the newspaper said that as far as the confetti was generally well contained, but it said that the people who were the main targets were sailors with their Dixie cup hats, because they would hold the confetti, and young ladies in low-cut dresses. Times never change. And it said it went on them like rain. But everybody seemed to have a good time. There didn't seem to be any arrests. And as I said, everyone pretty much had a pretty good time at that. It seemed to be an event for the younger people. The hat bands I had mentioned before, I jotted some down. Let me see if I can, let me just go back a minute and pick this up. The hat bands, I guess depending on whether you had a girlfriend or not, depended on, again, what you had. For instance, I'm sure that if you had a girlfriend, a hat band that said, "I'm in love," was appropriate. Or "My home is yours." If you were looking for a girlfriend, how about "I'm out for a good time"? There was no doubt what you were out for. And one that surprised me was "Oh, you kid." I thought that was a flapper type thing from the 20s, but obviously not. So everyone was out for a good time. Now, before we go into the last day of the event, I had mentioned "Come Josephine" in My Flying Machine. And it was played because, although written in 1910, it was popular in 1911, one of the popular songs. And the lady who sang it was a lady named Blanche Ring. And lo and behold, I found Blanche on the web. And not just music, but actually pictures of her, a little, rather neat little piece. So I'm going to play it here for a couple of reasons. One, it gives you an idea what the music was like in 1911. Two, it introduces the last day of the carnival. And three, I just happen to like it, okay? And since it's my talk, I'm going to play it here, okay? I think you'll enjoy it. Okay. Oh, before I move on, we move these around a little bit. 500 students from the French schools in Fall River on the steps of St. Anne's making up a living flag. There's another picture of it which gives you a slightly better view. As I said, they drove them everywhere, showed them everything. Okay.
In the sea
Al Jolson.
Oh, my, you're a shy queen, not I. I'm a shy queen. Oh, I'm up in the air about this for sale. Come on, the beat in my flying machine, going up. She's low, stand the sun, and like a bird on the beam in the air. She goes, where will she go? Up, it put it higher. Oh, look, the moon is on fire. Come on, the beat in my flying machine, going up, goodbye. Come on, the beat in my flying machine, going up. She goes, balance off and like a bird on a beam in the air. She goes, where will she go? Up, it put it higher. Oh, look, the moon is on fire. Come on, the beat in my flying machine, going up, goodbye.
They don't write songs like that anymore. You know, my dad was 40 years old when I was born. He was born in 1898. And he sang all these songs, and he sang them to me. And I sang them to my kids, which rather say, by the way, I want you to know that this is not from my period, okay? I'm a little bit later than this. I've come from the 50s and 60s. But in any case, I always sang these songs. That was one of those things. I'm not a great singer. I can remember standing watch in the middle of the North Atlantic as lookout, and in order to stay awake singing some of these songs. And one of the songs my dad sang was something called Hello My Baby, Hello My Honey, Hello My Ragtime Gal. Well, don't you know, I sang it to my son, and one day my wife is walking through the mall, and he's singing this song, and he's in a stroller, and this lady came up to my wife and said to him, she said, you know, where did he learn that song? She said, oh, my husband's singing it to me. She said, well, he must have an old father. No, just a square father. The last day, by the way, I think the Josephines in Fall River never had to worry about getting a ride in a flying machine. They hadn't had a ride in an automobile yet. The only conveyance they probably rode was a trolley. But in any case, it was nice to dream. And they're going to get a chance the last day of the carnival to actually see, in most cases, their first airplane. And Glenn Curtis came to town with his airplane. You can see it there. It looks sort of like a kite with a motor on it. It called the Curtis Type B, 50 horsepower, could go about 50 miles an hour in the water. It had to go that fast in order to generate lift. But in the air, it could go an amazing 80 miles an hour. And he gave several demonstrations. Went up, flew over the city, going up about 50 feet above the crowd, then 100 feet, and then all the way up to 400 feet when he passed over the lighthouse. Came back, landed again. It got to be a little bit choppy, which was a little tough on the airplane. So what he ended up doing in this particular case was he waited a while and then did a second flight and actually raced a motorboat, gave the motorboat a 200-yard head start. The motorboat could do 20 miles an hour. He could do 50. So obviously, in the length of the race, he caught it quite easily and beat it. The motorboat was called the Porpoise, by the way. But even then, 20 miles an hour in a boat in 1911 is a pretty amazing thing. There were boat races all along the river, and it was sort of the river aviation day, if you like. And of course, eventually he flew off into the sky, and that was probably the last plane Fall River saw for some particular time. Okay, next one. Here's a close-up view of Curtis. And the newspaper mentioned he changed his shoes, but they didn't know why, because he didn't even get his feet wet. I don't know where you'd put a passenger in that plane, certainly not. But you know, this is 1911, World War I. They were fighting, it was aerial combat. And they had and so the plane developed rather rapidly. Okay. There are no speed laws in Fall River. The sky is the limit. Obviously, the policeman that gave my wife a ticket a few months back didn't know that. In any case, we're not talking about speed limits here. Because I told you, Fall River thought they had the world by the tail in 1911. Everything was just hunky-dory. And then what happened? For instance, in 1912, the number of spindles in the city peaked. And then there was a slow decline. In 1922, World War I think, probably saved the cotton industry, gave it a few more years. In 1922, there were 30,700 people working in the textile mills. In 23, 30,000, only a drop of 700. In 24, 20,000. 1/3 of the operators were out of work. And then I think World War II later on kind of saved a few mills, and then they went out of business as soon as the war was over. What happened? Well, a number of things. You had to compete with the South. The South were building modern mills, and they had modern looms. They could produce cloth at a faster rate. In Fall River, it seems that what happened was the mill owners primarily took the profit and did not reinvest in the mills into better equipment. And so what was happening here was had machines that produced cloth at a lower rate. No unions in the South. They had cheaper workers. And of course, they were where the raw materials were. You didn't have to ship them from North Carolina to New York and at the Fall River. You saw that there were 1,500 bales a week was what they used at the American Print Works. 1,500 bales of cotton, one mill. Okay, so everything the handwriting was on the wall. So that was going to be the end of the textile industry in the city. And of course, it was replaced by the needle trades, and of course, eventually we ended up the competition from, this time, not so much from the South, but from across the seas, took most of those jobs away as well. And unfortunately, we probably still have a workforce that has the skill set of a cotton worker, where we need somebody with much higher education and a higher skill set. There's that old song, from Camelot. For one brief shining moment, there was Camelot. Well, Fall River had its brief shining few decades, and cotton was king, and we enjoyed it while we could. We had a big party in 1911, and here we are today, and maybe we'll find our direction and find something that we can do in the future. I thank you very much for your attention.